When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Neon Glow. User: 18wheelzr. Posted March 1st, 1997.
I killed the engine and leaned back in the driver's seat, letting out a long breath. The silence hit hard, the kind of quiet you don't notice until you stop moving. My legs ached, my eyes burned, and honestly, all I could think about was taking a piss, maybe a few minutes of sleep, and I don't know, grabbing some sugar or something before I got back on the road. The sign for the rest area had been a godsend, glowing green in the dark like a little slice of heaven waiting for me up ahead. I'd been winding through these empty mountain roads for a while now, and when I finally made it down, I was a little surprised to not see any other vehicles, even right here in the parking lot. In retrospect, that should have made me nervous, but I was too tired to care. My rig's clock read 2:37 a.m., and the road ahead stretched another 2 hours to the distribution center, but my body was screaming for a break, and I might be one to push my limits, but I do know exactly what they are. The place looked huge for a rest stop, like a glowing casino in the desert with a sleek, modern design, wide parking lot, glossy windows, and blinding bright halogen lights. It had all the hallmarks of something built to handle heavy foot traffic, rows of vending machines, spotless picnic tables, even a pair of flagpoles out front. But just like the road leading here, it was empty. Too empty. Not a single car was in sight. Not a trucker grabbing a smoke in the lot. Not a clerk behind a counter. As I sat there in my rig, surveying it, the building loomed over me, silent and sterile. It almost looked like it had been abandoned right after a cleaning crew finished scrubbing it down. For a place this size, there should have been someone. Well, I stepped out of the cab and stretched, my boots crunching on the pristine gravel. The cold air hit me sharp enough to wake me up a little, but it didn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. My truck ticked softly behind me, the sound oddly loud in the stillness. It was the only noise for miles. The urge to piss is real, though, and if that is stinging you bad enough, you'll ignore just about anything. So I went ahead and made my way inside. The automatic doors slid open as I approached, revealing a brightly lit interior that was almost painfully clean. Tile floors so polished they reflected the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. Walls painted a sterile beige with dark wooden trim. There were plastic chairs arranged in neat rows, a little waiting area off to one side, and a row of vending machines glowing faintly along the far wall. This was a nice truck stop, that is for sure, but where the fuck was everyone? No attendant, no janitor, no patrons. It was strange. Most places like this had someone manning the front, even in the dead of night. The air even smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, like someone had just mopped, but there was something else underneath it, something faintly metallic. "Hello!" My voice echoed off the tile, bouncing around the empty room before fading into silence. Nothing. No reply. Just the faint hum of the vending machines and the occasional click of the overhead lights. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just a place to take a piss, so let's get moving. I headed for the men's room, my boots echoing loudly through the cavernous space, and found the restroom was spotless. Every stall slightly ajar, gleaming porcelain toilets inside. The urinals looked like they'd never been used, and the mirrors were so clear they almost looked fake. Even the motion-activated faucets worked perfectly, the water warm and steady. It was too perfect. Places like this always had something, a flickering light, a graffiti tag on the stall door, a cigarette butt someone didn't bother to flush, but this, it felt staged, like a showroom nobody was meant to use. As I stepped back into the lobby, I felt it again. That strange stillness, heavy and oppressive, like the building itself was holding its breath. The vending machines hummed softly, their lights flickering faintly, but the air felt colder now, sharper. It was the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. I fished a crumpled dollar out of my pocket and slid it into the slot of one of the machines. The gears whirred, clicking as I punched the button for a Snickers. Nothing happened. I frowned and pressed the button again. Still nothing. The machine's screen blinked, the words "out of service" flashing for a split second before the lights flickered and went dark. Weird. I turned to the next machine, but before I could put my money in, I heard it. A faint sound, soft and rhythmic. Footsteps. I froze, the hair rising up on the back of my neck. The steps echoed faintly, coming from somewhere deeper inside the building, but when I turned to look, there was no one there, just rows of empty chairs, their plastic backs gleaming in the fluorescent light. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice unsteady. The footsteps stopped. Something was wrong. I could feel it now, crawling up the back of my neck. The silence wasn't natural. It wasn't just the absence of sound. Again, it was a void, deep and suffocating, like the building itself was waiting for me. I backed toward the door, my pulse racing, but the automatic sensor didn't trigger. The glass door stood still, my reflection staring back at me, pale and wide-eyed. I waved my hand around nervously, anxiously, but nothing. Then I heard the footsteps start again, slowly, methodically. Reaching out, I grabbed the handle and yanked it open manually, the metal ice cold against my palm. The night air hit me like a slap, sharp and bracing. I stumbled out into the parking lot, my breath foggy in the chill. The lot was just as empty as before, but it felt different now. The shadows around the edges seemed darker, stretching farther than they should. The halogen lights buzzed faintly now, their glow flickering just enough to make me glance over my shoulder. Nothing was there. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I wasted no time throwing it into gear. The tires kicked up gravel as I tore out of that lot, my headlights sweeping over the building one last time. I merged back onto the interstate, my knuckles white on the wheel, my breath shallow. But when I looked up into my rearview mirror, there was nothing but darkness. It was as if the rest stop, the bright white casino in the desert, hadn't ever existed in the first place.
Subject, the Yearbook. User, Class 1 Teen. Posted February 4th, 1995.
Have you ever seen something that doesn't make sense? Something that can't exist? Probably not, is my guess, and before tonight, my answer would have been exactly the same. But now, sitting here in the computer lab of my high school at 10 o'clock at night, I don't know what to think. I have to set the scene for you. It's probably not a good idea to be too specific about where I live, but I will say I live in the state of Utah and go to the biggest school in the state. For most of my life, it's been a pretty boring place, but then earlier this year, someone ripped off almost $1,000 worth of smokes from a grocery store on the town line. Well, I say someone, but I know exactly who it was. My buddy, who we'll call Jeff. Jeff's an idiot. Well, was an idiot. Jeff always wanted to be a tough guy, but he was a spoiled middle-class guy whose parents work for the school district. He got good grades, did his homework, and the only rebellious thing he did was listen to bootleg NWA tapes he got from one of the older guys at the pool hall. Even those he listened to quiet so his folks wouldn't hear. It was ridiculous and I would laugh at him, but then he started getting in deeper with the guys at the pool hall. They saw that Jeff was fronting a lot about being hard and started taking advantage of him. No one suspects the geeky kid from the nice house, right? It was piddly stuff at first, like ripping off vending machines, but when they saw that he'd always do exactly what they said, they started getting bigger ideas. And I know all this because Jeff friggin' told me. Which should be proof enough he was not cut out for a life of crime, but he wouldn't listen to me. Anyways, the guys started introducing him to some of the people they work for, the higher-ups, and Jeff was over the moon. He kept telling me he was going to be a maid guy, like in Goodfellas, even though the most Italian thing in our town is Francesco's restaurant, and I'm pretty sure that's owned by a Mexican family. He wouldn't listen, though, and the stuff he told me about the guys he met was, well, it wasn't great. I'm not going to repeat it here because even if Jeff was an idiot, I'm not. Those higher-up guys wanted him to do more serious stuff. Specifically, they wanted him to rip off a shipment of cigarettes from a delivery truck downtown, and he did. I don't know the details, just that he did it because he came to my house after it happened. 130 cartons of cigarettes in his trunk, and he screeches into my driveway looking as guilty as someone can. His face was pale and he was sweating. He told me no one had seen him take the smokes, at least so far as he knew, but he was sick with guilt. Like I said, he wasn't a gangster. I told him these older guys didn't sound like they were playing around, so he had to finish what he started. Just give them what they asked for, I told him. Then tell them you can't do it anymore. He shook his head. I can't, Matt. My parents will know. I just know they will. I tried to tell him his parents were Republicans, not psychics, but he wouldn't listen. He was convinced that if he took the money from this job, that they'd sniff it out somehow and then get the whole story out of him. For all I know, he was right, but I never got to find out. Before I could talk him out of it, Jeff decided he had to get rid of the smokes, that the older guys would be cool with it if he told them there was heat. Well, he took off before I could convince him otherwise. You know what he did? He threw them in the garbage. Almost $1,000 worth of cigarettes tossed into the dumpster behind Francesco's. And you know what they did? These older guys? No one does, because Jeff never came home. His parents thought he'd run away from home, so they filed a police report, put up flyers, the whole bit. They even put together a search party and combed the forests outside town. I went with them. Of course I did. How could I not? But I knew he wasn't lost. Well, not in the way that ends with you being found. That visit after the robbery was the last time I saw my friend, until tonight. Mrs. Hannah lets me use the AV lab at night because I edit the video yearbook every year. She knows I won't mess the place up and will remember to lock everything before I go. Usually I come on Tuesday nights when my dad takes my little brother to his Order of the Arrow meetings, but this week, all the chapters are having a big banquet at the El Cudo Lounge, so I just stayed at school after final bell. There are a million tapes to review, so I've been sitting here for hours, fast-forwarding through the hours of sports everyone seems to think we need to save for posterity. Do they think anyone is ever actually going to watch a wrestling meet after the fact? Now, I know at the beginning I said something had happened, and I guess you can tell I'm stalling. Why am I stalling? It has to do with the last tape I went through. It was one I recorded, an interview reel where I walk around the school asking people stupid questions. It was supposed to be funny, but with Jeff gone almost 4 months at that point, I didn't really feel like laughing. What I saw on the tape wasn't there when I recorded it. I can say that for sure because I'd have known. It had been recorded in the gymnasium just after a pep rally for a Huskies game. I was on the court floor talking to one of the cheerleaders about something when, behind her in the bleachers, I saw Jeff. He was just standing there, but it was him, wearing the same outfit he'd had on that day at my house when he ripped off the truck. He was surrounded by kids, but no one in the stands reacted. It was as if he wasn't really there. Me, I nearly fell out of my chair. By the time I got over to the VCR, a new interview had started, so I had to rewind back to the cheerleader, and Jeff was still there in the top left of the screen. He looked pale and sad. I felt a lump rise in my throat as if all the things I've wanted to say to him these last few months crashed into one another as they tried to get out. I don't know how to explain this next part except to say it was like he knew. This figure of my friend on screen, which I'd captured months after his disappearance, raised its right hand and gave a little wave. If I'd had any doubts who that was, they were dispelled in that moment. What the hell was going on? The tape ran past the cheerleader segment, so I rewound it again. But this time, Jeff wasn't there. The same students were in the bleachers. The same cheerleader was saying the same stuff, but he was gone. Is gone. I guess I've known all this time.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.